You remember the talk, don't you? It was in the air like the smell of cut grass in summer. The American dream. It wasn't just a phrase you heard from a politician on a flickering television screen. It was real. It was something your neighbor had, something your father worked for. In the 70s, you could see it. A man could work at the steel mill or the auto plant, a steady job. He could buy a house, a small one maybe, but it was his. He could raise a family on that one paycheck. Life wasn't easy. No one is saying it was easy. But it was simpler. There was a path you could see, a ladder you could climb. The feeling carried on through the 80s and 90s. Sure, things got more complicated. There were recessions, there were worries. But the core of the promise held firm. You went to college or you learned a trade. You got a job, you worked hard. You could expect to be rewarded for that hard work with a life of dignity and security. You could afford a mortgage. You could afford to take the kids on a vacation once a year, maybe to a national park or a beach. You didn't have to check your bank account every time you put a gallon of milk in your shopping cart. The stress was different then. It was about getting the promotion, not about whether you'd have a job next month. Now, in 2025, that memory feels like a story someone else told you. It feels like a black and white movie from a long-gone era. The rules have all been rewritten, but nobody handed us the new rulebook. The path that was once so clear is now covered in fog. The rungs on that ladder feel loose, ready to give way under your feet. People talk about the dream, but they talk about it like it's a ghost, a whisper of something that used to haunt these streets. They wonder if it was ever real at all, or just a nice story we told ourselves to get through the day. The foundation of it all, a good job, a home, a secure future, seems to have crumbled. The world today moves at a frantic pace, and the economy feels like a bucking horse that you can't quite hold on to. Back then, you could plan for 5 years, 10 years down the line. You could put money away for the kids' college education. You could look forward to retirement with a pension you had earned over a lifetime of loyalty. Now, planning for next week feels like a victory. The sense of stability that once formed the bedrock of American life has been replaced by a constant gnawing uncertainty. It's a feeling that settles deep in your bones, a low hum of anxiety that never quite goes away, no matter how hard you work. There was a time when you got a job and you stayed there. You were the Ford man or the IBM guy. You wore that identity like a badge of honor. In the 1970s and 80s, loyalty was a two-way street. You gave the company your time, your effort, your best years. In return, the company gave you security. They gave you a pension plan, health insurance that actually covered you, and a sense of belonging. You knew your coworkers for decades. You watched their kids grow up. Your job was more than just a paycheck. It was a community. It was a place where you built a life. Layoffs happened, of course. Nothing was ever perfect. But they were seen as a last resort, a failure on the part of the company. Now, in 2025, layoffs are just part of the business model. They call it restructuring or right-sizing. They are announced in cold corporate emails or brief video calls. Your loyalty means very little when the quarterly earnings report comes out. The bond between the worker and the company has been severed. You are no longer seen as an asset to be invested in, but as an expense to be managed. This shift has changed the very soul of what it means to have a job in America. Think about a man who started at a manufacturing plant in 1985. He expected to retire from that same plant 40 years later. He learned every machine on the floor. He trained the new guys. He was a part of the place, and the place was a part of him. Compare that to his grandson in 2025. The young man has had 5 different jobs in the last 10 years, not by choice, but by necessity. He's a consultant or a contractor. He has no pension, and his health insurance is tied to a marketplace plan he can barely afford. He doesn't know his coworkers' last names. He is always looking for the next gig because he knows this one could disappear tomorrow. This constant churn creates a deep sense of instability. It's hard to put down roots when you don't know if you'll have to move for a new job next year. It's hard to feel a sense of pride in your work when you know you are disposable. The company man of the past might have complained about his boss or the long hours, but he slept at night knowing his job was secure. Today's worker lies awake wondering if their key card will work in the morning. That is the fundamental difference. The The promise of security, the reward for a lifetime of hard work, has been replaced by the cold reality of perpetual insecurity. In the 1970s, buying a house was a milestone. It was what you did when you got married and started a family. It was the biggest piece of the American dream. A young couple, maybe with one of them working as a teacher and the other as a mechanic, could save up for a few years and get a down payment on a starter home. The median home price was something you could wrap your head around, maybe 3 or 4 times the average yearly income. A 30-year mortgage was a commitment, but it was a manageable one. It was the foundation upon which you built your future, a place to call your own. Fast forward to the 1990s. The prices were higher, yes, but wages had also gone up. It was still achievable for most middle-class families. You might have to move a little further out into the suburbs, but the dream was still within reach. You could look at the real estate section in the Sunday paper and see possibilities. You could drive through neighborhoods and imagine your kids playing in the yard. Homeownership was the primary way families built wealth, a nest egg for the future. It was a tangible asset, something solid you could touch and feel, a symbol that you had made it. It was a piece of the American promise made of wood and brick. Now look at the housing market in 2025. It feels like a cruel joke. The median home price in many cities is 10, 12, or even 15 times the median annual income. Young people look at these prices and they don't see a dream. They see an impossible wall they can never hope to climb. They work multiple jobs, they save every penny, and they are still priced out of the market. The homes are being bought up by investment firms and wealthy cash buyers, turning what was once a cornerstone of family life into just another commodity to be traded on a spreadsheet. The starter home is an endangered species. The psychological toll is immense. For generations, owning a home was a sign of adulthood, of stability. It meant you were building something permanent. Today, millions of people in their 30s and 40s are still renting, subject to rising rents and the whims of a landlord. They feel like they are falling behind, stuck in a state of perpetual adolescence. The dream of a backyard for the dog, of painting a nursery, of having a space that is truly yours, has been deferred indefinitely. For many, it has been extinguished altogether. The housing dream is now a source of deep anxiety and resentment for a generation that played by the rules but found the game was rigged. Do you remember what a trip to the grocery store was like in the 1980s or 90s? You'd fill up the cart. A gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, some meat for dinner, maybe some cookies as a treat for the kids. The total at the checkout line might make you sigh, but it wouldn't send you into a panic. A week's worth of groceries for a family of 4 might cost $50 or $60. You could budget for it. It was a predictable expense. You weren't forced to make agonizing choices between buying fresh vegetables or paying the electric bill. Food was just food. It was nourishment, not a source of financial dread. You could feel the abundance. The shelves were stocked, and the prices were stable. Inflation was a word you heard on the news, but it didn't feel like a thief in your pocket every time you went to the store. A single-income family could still manage to put a decent meal on the table every night. You could buy the name-brand cereal without feeling guilty. It was a small thing, but it was part of a larger sense of economic security. The cost of basic necessities was in proportion to what people were earning. You worked your 40 hours, and in return, you could afford to feed your family without breaking a sweat. Now, walk into a supermarket in 2025. The experience is completely different. Every item feels like a luxury. That same gallon of milk, that same loaf of bread, that same carton of eggs, their prices have shot up, far outpacing any growth in wages. A cart that is only half full can now cost what a full cart did just a few years ago. People stand in the aisles, pulling out their phones to use a calculator, trying to figure out what they can afford to put back on the shelf. The talk is all about shrinkflation, where the packages get smaller but the price stays the same, or goes up. It feels like you're getting less and paying more for everything. The stress is palpable. It's in the worried look on a young mother's face as she chooses the cheaper, less healthy option. It's in the quiet desperation of an elderly person on a fixed income, counting out change for a few essential items. This isn't about buying fancy organic foods. This is about the basics. This is about the fundamental need to eat. The weekly grocery bill has become a major source of anxiety for millions of American families. It's a constant, weekly reminder that their hard work is no longer enough to cover even the most essential costs of living. The dream of abundance has been replaced by the reality of scarcity. Back in the day, if you needed extra cash, you might pick up a shift at the diner or do some odd jobs for a neighbor. It was, a side thing. Your main job, the one with the steady paycheck and the benefits, that was the anchor. Nobody thought of delivering pizzas as a full-time career. It was a temporary step, a way to save up for a down payment or pay off a debt. The idea of building a life around this kind of work was honestly unheard of. The economy was built on the foundation of stable, long-term employment. That was the ideal, the goal that everyone was working toward. But the landscape of work has been completely transformed. Today, in 2025, we live in the age of the gig economy. For many, it's not really a choice, it's a necessity. After a layoff from a corporate job, or because wages at a traditional job are just too low, people turn to driving for Uber or delivering for DoorDash. They turn their personal car into a workplace. On the surface, it offers flexibility. Be your own boss, the apps say. But, this freedom comes at a steep price. There is no job security, no benefits, no paid time off, and no guarantee of a steady income. You are entirely on your own. The wear and tear is relentless. Every mile you drive for a $10 delivery puts stress on your engine, your tires, your brakes. You're depreciating your most valuable asset, your car, just to make ends meet. And then there's the price of gas, a constant variable that can wipe out your earnings for the day. You're not just a driver. You're a small business owner without any of the support. You have to track your own expenses, handle your own taxes, and absorb all the risks. A flat tire isn't just an inconvenience. It's a financial crisis that can take you off the road for days. This isn't a side hustle for many people anymore. It's their main source of income, or maybe one of 2 or 3 jobs they have to juggle just to stay afloat. You see people out at all hours in all weather, chasing the next delivery, the next ride. They're caught in a cycle of working constantly just to cover their immediate expenses, with no way to save for the future. The gig economy was sold as a story of entrepreneurial freedom, but for many, it has become a trap. It's a modern-day grind that offers the illusion of control while stripping away the security that once defined the American job. You remember the gas lines of the 70s? Sure, that was a crisis. But for most of the 80s and 90s, the price of gasoline was honestly just an afterthought. It was just another small expense. You'd pull into the gas station, fill up the tank for maybe 15 or 20 bucks, and not think about it again until the needle got close to E. The price might fluctuate by a few cents, but it didn't dictate your life. You could still afford to take a Sunday drive. You could commute to a job in the next town over without doing complex math about whether the trip was worth it. Gas was cheap, and that cheap energy fueled the American way of life. The cost was predictable. It was a stable part of the household budget. When you took a job that was 30 miles away, you could calculate the cost of your commute and know that it wouldn't suddenly double overnight. This stability was crucial. It allowed people to live in more affordable suburbs and work in the city. It gave them the freedom to visit family members who lived a few hours away. The price of gas was a background detail, not the main character in a story of financial struggle. The hum of the engine was the sound of freedom, not the sound of money draining from your bank account. Now, in 2025, the price at the pump is a source of constant, nagging stress. It's the first thing you see on the news in the morning, and the last thing you worry about at night. A full tank of gas can cost $70, $80, even $100 or more. For someone working a low-wage job or driving for a gig service, that's a huge chunk of their daily earnings, gone before they even start. Every flicker of the price, up or down, has a direct and immediate impact on a family's ability to survive. It's a barometer of our economic pain. This isn't just an inconvenience. It has fundamentally changed how people live. The Sunday drive is a luxury of the past. People think twice before accepting a job with a long commute. Visiting relatives becomes a calculated expense. For the DoorDash driver or the Uber driver, the high price of gas is a direct pay cut. They are working harder, driving more miles, just to make the same amount of money they did last year. The freedom of the open road has been replaced by the anxiety of the fuel gauge. The car, once a symbol of American independence, has become a ball and chain for many. In the old days, you worked your 8 hours, you punched the clock, and you went home. Your time was your own. The evenings were for family dinner, for helping the kids with their homework, for sitting on the porch. The weekends were for mowing the lawn, for going to church, for having a barbecue with the neighbors. There was a clear line between work life and home life. When you left the factory or the office, your job stayed there until the next morning. This separation was sacred. It allowed you to rest, to recharge, to be a person outside of your profession. This structure was the backbone of a balanced life. A single, full-time job was, for many, enough to support a family. The idea of working 60 or 70 hours a week across multiple jobs was not the norm. It was a sign that something was wrong. People took pride in a hard day's work, but they also valued their leisure time. That time was earned. It was the reward for their labor. Life was not an endless cycle of work, sleep, and more work. There was room to breathe, to pursue a hobby, to simply be present with the people you loved. The rhythm of life was slower, more human. Today, in 2025, that line between work and life has been erased. People are working longer hours than ever before, not for advancement, but for survival. They stitch together a living from a full-time job, a part-time retail position on the weekends, and a few hours of gig work in the evenings. The 40-hour workweek is a distant memory for millions. The workday doesn't end when you leave the office. It follows you home on your smartphone, with emails and messages demanding a response at all hours. There is no off switch. The result is a workforce that is exhausted, stressed, and burned out. People are running on fumes, sacrificing sleep, family time, and their own well-being just to pay the rent and keep the lights on. The constant pressure to work more, to earn more, just to maintain a basic standard of living is crushing. There is no time for hobbies, no energy for community, no space for rest. This relentless grind is not the American dream. It's a nightmare of perpetual motion, where you have to run faster and faster just to stay in the same place. It's a life spent entirely on a treadmill with no end in sight. There's a feeling that settles over you, a quiet weight in the chest. It's the feeling of running a race you know you can't win. For generations of Americans, the future was a source of optimism. Life would be better for your children than it was for you. This was the unspoken promise, the engine of progress. In the 70s and 80s, even during tough times, there was an underlying belief that hard work and perseverance would lead to a better tomorrow. You could see the path forward. You could imagine a future that was brighter, more prosperous, and more secure. That hope was a powerful force. This optimism was grounded in reality. You could see your neighbors buying homes. You could see your coworkers getting promotions. You could see the tangible rewards of a life spent working hard and playing by the rules. The psychological effect of this was profound. It gave people a sense of purpose and a belief in the fairness of the system. Stress existed, but it was often the stress of ambition, of trying to get ahead, rather than the stress of desperation, of trying not to fall behind. There was a fundamental confidence in the future, a belief that the country was on the right track. Today, for so many, that optimism has been replaced by a deep and pervasive anxiety. The future doesn't look like a bright promise. It looks like a series of obstacles. How will I ever afford a home? How will I pay off my student loans? Will I ever be able to retire? These are the questions that haunt an entire generation. They look at the lives their parents and grandparents had, not with envy, but with a sense of bewilderment. How is that ever possible? The system that once seemed to offer a clear path to success now feels like a maze with no exit. This constant uncertainty takes a heavy psychological toll. It leads to stress, depression, and a sense of hopelessness. It's the feeling of being trapped, of working harder than any generation before for a smaller share of the pie. The social contract feels broken. The belief that hard work leads to a better life has been shaken to its core. The weight of now is the burden of knowing that the American dream, the story that defined a nation for a century, may no longer apply to you. It's the quiet fear that you are being left behind, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you look back. You look at the old photographs, at the lives of your parents and grandparents. It's easy to get lost in the nostalgia, to think of it as a golden era, and maybe it was. Not because life was perfect, but because the promise felt real. The American dream was a light on the horizon, a destination you could navigate toward. It was the belief that if you were a decent person and you worked hard, you could build a decent life for yourself and your family. It was a simple, powerful idea. It gave people hope. It gave them a reason to get up in the morning. The pieces of that dream were clear: a steady job that respected your loyalty, a home you could afford to call your own, the ability to provide for your family without working yourself into an early grave, and the belief that your children would have it even better. These weren't extravagant fantasies. They were considered the baseline of a successful life in America. They were the pillars that held up the middle class. And for a long time, for a lot of people, those pillars stood strong. They were the foundation of a stable and prosperous society. Now in 2025, that light has dimmed. For millions of people, it has gone out completely. The pillars have cracked and crumbled. Job security is a relic of the past. Homeownership is an unattainable luxury. A single job is no longer enough to support a family. And the hope that the next generation will have it better has been replaced by the fear that they will have it much, much worse. People feel like they are on a sinking ship, bailing water as fast as they can, but the leaks are too big and too many. The system feels rigged against them. The question hangs heavy in the air, in every quiet conversation, in every worried glance at a bill you can't pay. Was that era a historical accident? Was that prosperity a bubble that was always destined to burst? Or did we lose our way? Did we break the promise that once bound us together? You talk to the young people working 2 jobs, the families struggling to afford groceries, the gig workers burning through their cars and their savings. And you have to ask, can that golden era ever return? Can we find a way to reignite that fading light? Or is the American dream now just a story we tell about the way things used to be?